Good morning, my fellow international relations student. Good morning, Ms. Natasha. Thank you for your time. In this occasion, our group will explain about the sexual rights. But before we begin the presentation, we would like to introduce ourselves first. My name is Alfaqah Dwi, and I'm here with my teammates.
My name is Anastasia Sianturi.
Hi, I'm Dara.
My name is Shafira Alwainy.
Hello, my name is Anggia Oktavianty.
And in this occasion, we are going to explain you about the sexual rights. This presentation will be divided into 4 sessions. That is, in the first session, we are going to explain the long journey on the recognition of sexual rights. In the second session, we are going to explain, is sexual rights a part of human rights? While in the third session, we are going to explain why sexual rights considered as a challenge to religions. And finally, in the last session, we are going to provide the study case, which is the sexual rights for non-cisgenders, heterosexual people. Before we begin the presentation, we will tell you about the definition about sexual rights and reproductive right first. Laura Matar Davids stated in her journal that reproductive right and sexual rights is different and oftenly considered the same by many people. However, the reproductive right is more acceptable by many countries in this world than sexual rights. Laura Matar defined reproductive rights in her journal as the right to decide freely and responsibly on the number, spacing, and timing of one's children, and the right to have the information and means to make this decision. On the other hand, Laura Matar also defines sexual rights as a right to exercise sexuality and reproduction free from discrimination, coercion, and violence.
Now I'm going to tell you about the long journey of the recognition of sexual rights terms. So you might be wondering, when is the first time the term sexual rights mentioned? So according to the book by Sonia Korea, it is stated that the first time the term sexual rights mentioned is in the International Conference on Population and Development, or ICPD, which was held in Cairo, Egypt, 1994. However, many people who attend the conference considered the term sexual rights was too controversial to be approved as the inclusion in the official document of the ICPD 1994. Therefore, the ICPD 1994 failed to include the term sexual rights in its official document, and ICPD 1994 considered only covered the reproductive rights, not sexual health as a whole. But even though it failed to address the exact sexual rights meaning, the ICPD 1994 is still a milestone because it is the first time that representatives from more than 100 countries gathered together and acknowledged that sexual health was a vital part of human physiological and physical well-being. After ICPD 1994, which was held in Cairo, Egypt, the topic of sexual rights continued to be discussed, and controversies arose about the position of non-cisgender heterosexual people in the sexual rights. Therefore, the United Nations conducted 4th World Conference on Women, or FWCW, which was held in Beijing, China, 1 year after the ICPD 1994 in Cairo, Egypt. You can see the conclusion of the UNFWCW 1995, which was held in Beijing, on the slide. So, according to Laura Matar, she argued in her journal that the document of FWCW Beijing 1994 is still not addressed the exact definition of sexual rights. She argued that the rights mentioned in the document of FWCW Beijing 1995 refers to the rights that supposedly comprise sexual rights. Matar also argued in her journal that UNFWCW 1995 is still failed to give greater emphasis about the recognition of non-heterosexual people, which have been the main reason why the FWCW conducted in the first place. As I have mentioned before, that because of the controversies aroused in many people about the position of non-heterosexual people, so therefore UN conduct the FWCW. However, after the UN conduct FWCW, it still failed to give greater emphasis about the position of these non-heterosexual people. The FWCW 1995 has also been criticized for being too heterosexist because of its reference to man and woman reproduction. Now I'm going to tell you why the United Nations ICPD 1995 and FWCW 1995 in Beijing is more into reproductive rights than sexual rights. As I have mentioned, before that these two conferences failed to give greater emphasis about the exact meaning of sexual rights, and also failed to give greater emphasis about the position of non-cisgender heterosexual people. These two conferences, the ICPD and FWCW, succeed to influence the World Health Organization, IPPF, UNFPA, and many national, regional, and local organizations to recognize the reproductive rights and implement the programs that these two conferences talk about, which to promote sexual health and reproductive health. But Cottingham stated in his book that unfortunately, as time goes by, the emphasis was more into reproductive rights than sexual health, and many people could not differentiate the difference between sexual health and reproductive health. Therefore, sexual health was considered a part of reproductive health. So you might be wondering, why these two conferences more into reproductive rights than sexual rights? So Laura Mather argued in her journal that it is easier for many countries to accept the reproductive rights than the sexual rights. It is because of the cultural relativism that we will discuss further. So even though it failed to discuss about the exact meaning of sexual rights, but Korea and Howe stated in their book that because of these two conferences, the ICPD and the WCW, people began to know about reproductive health. These two conferences also succeed to raise awareness about reproductive health and sexual health globally. As I have mentioned before, that many people could not differentiate between the sexual rights and the reproductive rights. Therefore, sexual health was considered a part of reproductive health. Miller, in her book, she argued that the inclusion between reproductive rights and sexual rights could contribute to hinder the development of the recognition of sexual rights as an element of human rights. So, you might be wondering, what is the problem if sexual rights and reproductive rights combined? So, in Miller's view, sexual rights must be able to support the formation and expression of diverse and fluid sexual identity, including those who is not cisgender heterosexual. So you might be wondering, what is cisgender and heterosexual? So cisgender is when your gender identity or gender expression is matched with your sex that you have when you're born. And heterosexual people is when you're attracted to someone with the opposite sex which you have. And Miller argued in her book that if these two rights combine, it would not focus on the rights of non-cisgender heterosexual people. After the long journey of debate, finally the sexual rights began to be recognized by many people. So after a long time considered as a part of reproductive rights, finally sexual rights began to recognize by many people. The reason why sexual rights began to recognize is because of the establishment of several institutions that promote information regarding sexuality, that succeed to educate people about the importance of sexual health. In the early 21st century, there are two institutions that aims to promote sexuality education to people, aims to promote the importance of sexual health to people. The first one is the International Association for the Study of Sexuality and Culture. This conference brought together professionals and advocates from diverse fields and have focused on advancing sexual rights education and realization of sexual rights. Another major factors that support the sexual rights separation from reproductive right was the work of World Association of Sexology, or WAS. World Association of Sexology conduct the Valencia Declaration of Sexual Rights that includes the provision of sexual rights. In the early 21st century, the Pan American Health Organization, or PAHO, invited experts from World Association of Sexology, or WAS, to develop their sexual health promotion program in the region, in the American continent. The PAHO document focused on sexual health and did not link the sexual health to reproductive health or reproductive rights. Coleman also stated in his book that because of these two institutions and the PAHO document, people in the world began to more informed about sexual health and become more educated about the difference between sexual rights and reproductive rights, and therefore they finally could distinguish between the difference between sexual rights and reproductive rights. In the early 21st century, because of the growing understanding of people, the World Health Organization finally revised its definition of sexual health on its website that they posted in 1975 to differentiate, to distinguish between the sexual health and reproductive health. Not only the World Health Organization, but also the IPPF also revised its document. Another milestone of the recognition of sexual rights is the Yogyakarta Principle. In 2006, 29 experts with diverse backgrounds in human rights law from 25 countries gathered together in Yogyakarta to adopt the Yogyakarta Principle. These principles describe in detail how international human rights law applied to people of diverse sexual orientation and gender identities with respect to 29 principles from previous human rights documents. Because of this milestone, people began to more educated to distinguish between the sexual rights and reproductive rights, and the rights of those non-heterosexual people began to be recognized.
Next, we will talk about the ongoing debate towards sexual rights. First is about the social constructivism. Social constructivism believes that the social reality is created by the human beings from generation to generation, or also we can call it as social construct. As we all know, social construct having so many examples, and one of the example is the idea of virginity as the dignity. A bunch of people in the past believe that virginity is the most important aspect of a woman's life, and therefore women are taught to protect their virginity and not to lose it before her marriage. Somehow, if she lost her virginity, then this woman will be considered by the society as a whore and considered by humiliating the whole family. And once a girl lost her virginity, then she will never be considered the same as before, and didn't considered as dignified as before. In fact, there is no scientific research stated that the hymen is affecting women's life, and also there is no difference between women who haven't broke her hymen and women who has lost her hymen. It shows that the society has succeeded to construct the hymen as an important part of women's body to be a dignity. Then it is inevitable that sexuality is a taboo topic in many parts of the world. Issues related to sexuality can be fraught with confusion, unease, shame, and conflict due to cultural, religious, political, and economic factors. For all of these reasons, sexual rights did not receive the attention they deserve, because society has successfully constructed and also told the people to be ashamed when they want to talk about sex. Next, Swedish international developments and agencies stated in their publications that religious authorities and other social institutions have sought to regulate sexuality and sexual expressions
prescribing some forms of relationships such as heterosexual marriage. On the other hand, it prescribing others such as love between unmarried adolescents or homosexuals. Then, another social debate towards sexual rights will be discussed and explained by Shafira.
People who oppose the idea of sexual rights concerns about the cultural relativism, which is in the direct conflict with the human rights principle of universalism. Cultural relativism is believed that the behavior and custom of society should be evaluated within the context of its own culture and not with respect to outside universal standard. Human rights scholars have suggested a way to reduce the problem of confronting cultural norms that are viewed as the right violations. Luckily, it is a long journey after recognition of sexual rights, but after it's recognized as sexual rights is a part of human rights, and so there are a huge amount of the human rights document, both in international law and global consensus documents, had recognized the sexual and reproductive rights as a part of human rights. Some documents is Convention to Eliminate All Forms of Radical Discrimination or CERD, Convention Against Torture or CAT, Convention on the Rights of the Child, Convention on the Rights of a Person with Disability.
Yeah, and so not only convention and declarations, but also international covenant that has already ratified by most of the sovereign states in this world. In International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, it is stated that the state parties to the present covenant recognize the right of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of mental and physical health, and the benefits of scientific progress and its application. ICCPR also stated that no marriage shall be entered into without the free and full consent of the intending spouses. ICCPR, or International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, stated that everyone has the right to liberty and security of person. No one shall be subjected to unlawful interference with his or her privacy. No one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. And no one shall be subjected without his or her free consent to medical or scientific experimentation. And also, state parties also shall take appropriate steps to ensure equality of rights and responsibilities as spouses as to marriage, during marriage, and its dissolution.
Even though there are so many international law documents that recognize the sexual rights and reproductive rights as a part of human rights, but still, not all sovereign states in this world joined as a party into the Declaration or the Convention. How about the ICCPR or the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights? Some provision in ICCPR is considered recognize the sexual rights as a part of human rights, and most of sovereign states in this world already ratified the ICCPR, meaning that it's legally binding for all of its member states. However, in the ICCPR itself, there are two classifications of rights, which is the derogable rights and non-derogable rights. Non-derogable rights are fundamental rights in the ICCPR that are obligated to be adopted by all of the member states of ICCPR, meaning that a state who has ratified the ICCPR are obligated to adopt the non-derogable rights in the ICCPR. On the other hand, the derogable rights are rights that could be rejected to be implemented by a member state. Even though the member state already ratified the ICCPR, doesn't mean that they have to adopt every rights in the ICCPR. The state who has ratified the ICCPR has the right to reject provision some rights inside the ICCPR itself. The reason why a state rejects derogable rights in a covenant might be because the rights is not suitable with its culture. So therefore, in order to respect their culture, the state has the rights to reject several rights in the covenant. For example, this is just for example, just in case, Indonesia has ratified the ICCPR, meaning that Indonesia are obligated to adopt non-derogable rights provision in the ICCPR. But For the derogable rights provision in ICSPR, Indonesia, it depends on Indonesia. It depends on Indonesia whether Indonesia wants to adopt all of the derogable rights or not. To conclude, is sexual rights a part of human rights? Yes, sexual rights is a part of human rights. For several Western states that had adopted the sexual rights and reproductive rights law to its domestic law, and it is only applied to its jurisdiction. So, meaning that it's not cross boundaries. Meaning that those countries who haven't implement sexual rights law to its domestic law, meaning that they still haven't recognized the sexual rights as a part of human rights.
Okay, after we discuss and explain about the definition, history, and the ongoing debate towards sexual rights, now we will move to the next question, which is sexual rights a challenge to religion? If it's yes, why does it have to become a challenge for religion? What are the reasons? First thing first, we will talk about the sexual behavior in religions point of view. According to journal by Matthew A. Ojo, many religious groups have been concerning the regulation of sexual behavior at various times and various cultural settings. They also believe that the societal values can be used as their reference point or may resort to internal dynamics or an agenda of renewal in deciding how to regulate sexual behavior. Next, he also argued that the control of sexual behavior by the Christian group is an institutional way and the most ubiquitous modalities where religious groups can demonstrating its power and exercising social control over their members. Next, we will discuss about the sexual rights in the current society. According to International Women's Health Coalition, in collaboration with the other leading human rights and sexual health organization, the sexual rights consist of three things, which are first, the rights to the highest attainable standard of sexual health, then the right to pursue a satisfying, safe, and pleasurable sexual life, and the third is to have control and decide their sexual orientation freely. Other than that, sexual rights is the right to control our own body and sexuality without any form of discrimination, violence, and coercion. Those rights somehow could lead into the unbridled sexual activity which contrary to all of the religious teachings and norms. By this statement, it is clear that sexual rights that emerging in the current society is become a challenge to the religion.
So why the sexual rights considered as a challenge to religion? So, according to Christian perspective, the central concept of sexuality is chastity and sincerity. Any sexual activity that is merely fun and pleasure-based will lead into sinful acts. So, according to Ojo and its journal, there are two factors that have challenged Christian church greatly and made it to promote conservative tradition about sexuality, which are the first challenge is the construction of sex and sexuality by the contemporary media has been viewed as too permissive and challenge to traditional Christian values. The media showed sex as free, not inhibiting, and can be centered for fun and pleasure. Unregulated sex and sexual expression are part of the liberating influence of modernity. The church believes that the entertainment industry has played a role in decline of traditional values about sex and sexuality. And the second challenge is the belief that modern media construction of sex and sexuality is an indirect promotion of Western permissive values, which are clash to both the African values and Christian ethical principles. And the third, the church considered that sexual rights is a satanic control to challenge the religion.
Another thing that supports the idea of sexual rights and turns these rights into a challenge which is strongly contradictory to the religion is the rapid development of science. The scientific research play a role in justifying the prohibited things in religion such as abortion. Many religions have opposed loudly towards the abortion because it reflects the act of killing other human. In Christian theology of life, for instance, they claim the dignity and sanctity of life. They consider the act of abortion is a culture of violence and death. The church will only accept the abortion if it is a spontaneous abortion, otherwise called miscarriage, or carried out to save the life of the mother. Meanwhile, in the sexual rights, there is still another strong reason to permit abortion, which are social reasons such as poverty, unstable economic condition, or maybe the mother is too young to cope with the child. And another reason of government policy matter as a way of regulating the population size of BBC. After this, we will discuss, and our group will also explain to you about the ongoing debate towards abortion, which will be discussed by my friend Shafira.
So right now we're gonna talking about the debate on abortion. Abortion in the science perspective is not the act of violence which is murdering or killing innocent human as what religions see. Many scholars state that a fetus in the pregnancy cannot be considered as a human being before they entering a certain time periods of its existence. In 2009, Dabah stated that according to the proponents, we are not authorized to refer to 4 weeks embryo as a human being, as it is just a complex of cellular elements. In the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the foundation of human rights, the text and negotiating history of the right to life, explicitly premise a human rights on birth. Likewise, other international and regional human rights treaties as draft and subsequently interpret that clearly reject claims that human rights should attack from conception or any time before birth. In addition, a review by Britain's Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists showed that many neurologists agreed on the statement that we should have a cortex to feel the sense of pain, which also strongly agreed by the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. Cortex won't be functioning before the fetus reaches 7 months of its existence, and meaning that the fetus in pregnancy won't feel any sense of pain if it gets carried away or being aborted. The thing that needs to be emphasized is there is a big difference between murder and abortion. Fetus and embryos are not independent and not a self-determining beings. Abortion is the termination of the pregnancy, not baby, and the last is a person's age is calculated since the birth date, not conception, and to give some addition, fetus is not counted in the census. So, if we look by the religion's point of view, abortion is clearly prohibited because it is against the value of life, which is sanctity and dignity. But if we look at by the secular's point of view, abortion is allowed. After we see the argument from many scholars, it is obvious that the abortion is not an act of murder, given the fact that fetus won't feel any sense of pain before it reaches 7 months of its existence. Abortion didn't harm any human being exist in this world. The legalization of abortion could prevent many women experience mental health issues caused by suffering from the unprepared conditions to cope with a baby. Therefore, if some individual choosing their own life decision, especially in the sexual matters that against with religions or norms, other people cannot interfere and prohibit their belief with religious defense. As long as those people didn't provoke, harm each others, and giving wrong influence, they could choose any sexual matters freely without violence and discrimination.
From the abortion case that have been explained by Shafira, we could clearly see that not only media and entertainment that had been a challenge to religion, but also the rapid development of science. Why the rapid development of science could challenge the religion? It is because of the rapid development of science, it enables people to identify every incident that happened in this world. Somehow, the scientific reason or logical thinking that we have is clash with what the religion have taught its people. It is challenge to religion because people began to be more well informed in deciding who to believe, the scientific reason or the religion. We also provide this presentation with study case, and the study case that we are going to bring today is the discrimination over LGBT people increases the number of suicidal feelings towards the LGBT people. Hartoyo, a LGBT activist, reported in 2016 that because of the discrimination towards the non-cisgender heterosexual people, it increased the rate of depression and anxiety towards them. We also provided a data that we have found about the high rate of violation towards the LGBT people that could make them feel unworthy and willing to die.
This data from Police Record Home Office in England, Wales, prove that hate crimes activity increasing each year and it becomes an urgency to look at. So in this slide, it also shows us the number specific hate crimes in sexual orientation categories, which is the second largest hate crimes categories after hate crime in race list. And from this data, there are 14.491 cases of sexual orientation hate crimes in the region of 2018 until 2019, up to 25% compared with the previous years. Such a huge number.
One of my teammates already explained about the criminalization towards the non-heterosexual people and non-cisgender people in the United Kingdom. And we also provide data in our country, which is Indonesia, about the violence of non-cisgender heterosexual people. The data is from research conducted by Indonesian NGO called the Arus Pelangi. The result of the research showed that more than 89% of non-cisgender heterosexual people in Indonesia have experienced violence in the last 3 years.
Like I already talked before, that the LGBT get violence from this society. In this violence action, it divided several types of violence towards the LGBT people. And in this diagram, you can see the percentage of the violence. There are 5 types of violence based on the data that we found, and the most highest percentage of violence was the physical violence.
And from the data that we have shown you, could you imagine what happened next? Okay, now we're going to talk about the high number of depression and anxiety that happened among the non-heterosexual people and the non-cisgender people that made them feeling and thinking to willing to die. Non-heterosexual people or non-heterosexual teenager at a high risk for experience distress and abuse and victimization as well.
Based from the data, a recent meta-analysis that stated by Friedman et al. In 2011 found that lesbian, gay, and bisexual or LGBT adolescents report higher rates of abuse, victimization, and bullying than their heterosexual peers. LGBT young adults also report higher rates of mental illness, suicidal ideation, and self-harm when compared to their non-LGBT peers. LGBT young adults are over 5 times more likely than their non-LGBT peers to report suicidal ideation, stated by Almeida et al. In 2009. In fact, recent findings suggest that LGBT young adults are 5 times more likely to report previous suicide attempts compared to their non-LGBT peers, and that 25% to 32% of transgender-led adolescents and young adults have had a previous suicide attempt.
Now we're gonna explain to you why it could happen. So basically there is one main reason why it could happen. It is because of the social constructivism all over the societies, and it divided into two factors, that is based on religion and the point of view that LGBT is a kind of disease, that it is contagious. For that, I'm going to explain you what is social constructivism itself. So simply, it is kind of norms that were conceptualized as a speck of social structure that emerged from the actions and beliefs of actors in specific communities. So basically, there is some kind of norms that construct the point of view of the society, and it is being the beliefs of the society.
And as we know, human made religion as the guide for them to live in this world, and what religion says before has been their guide to see something. That is how people has their own point of view. So every norms shape and construct in the form of religion. If we see now over the centuries, and as we know, none of the religions says that LGBT habits or LGBT action is right. So based on Masturia Saddan article, journal about LGBT religion and human rights, religious doctrine and biological determinism assume that heterosexuality is normative and non-heteronormativity is false and deviant. And over centuries, human thought has been dominated by the point of view that heterosexuality is normal and natural, while homosexuality is considered as a deviation, abnormal, a mental disorder, or mental illness. It is also supported by what happened in the reality, because the heteronormative model dominates sexual and gendered construction, in which heterosexuality is the only correct relationship, while other sexual relations and gender identities are deemed anomalous and false. That is why when we see a same-sex couples in the street, it feels not normal and it feels weird, because we have been taught and doctrine, and our mind has shaped and construct that kind of concept, the LGBT concept, is wrong and it's not right. And because we see that it is not common in our daily life, it is being abnormal and it is rejected by the society. And now, as the millennium has entered the era of globalization, people from different backgrounds more easily travel and interact. For this reason, it is imperative to openly discuss the topic of different sexualities and existence of LGBTs, and it is important to ensure LGBT citizens and visitors are respected and valued according to the principles of human right.
So second is the social construct that LGBT is a disease and contagious. Back in 2017, there is an ex-former minister of physician, a lawmaker of conservative New Democracy, claimed that homosexuality is a contagious disease. Back to his interview to Parapolitica Web TV, Gerasimos Giacomatos claimed that in medical terms, homosexuals appear in two ways. First, they have acquired it, or they were born like this. He also says that if you watch TV, all the examples, 90% are homosexuals. When the child sees whatever is being broadcast, it gets infected. It's an infectious disease, he says. But in the end, the New Democracy leader called him, then made him to apologize about his homophobic statement. Because the truth is, it is not even a disease, and it cannot be contagious because it's not even a disease. So LGBT groups at the international level have long been excluded from the category of people with mental disabilities, culminating on December 15, 1973. And the American Psychiatric Association, or APA, removed homosexuals from the official list of people and emotional disorders, so that in 1974 they officially removed the inclusions of people homosexual problems of mental disorders that were followed in 1975. The APA issued a resolution supporting the eliminations of the category of mental disabilities, and these two associations urge psychologists in the world to help eliminate the stigma of mental disorders towards LGBT people over the past 25 years, because it is not a disease, meaning that LGBT itself is not contagious because it's not even a disease. So that is why it's such a huge shame on us to let the number of the suicidal ideations among the LGBT rise up each year because of some facts that are not true, and the point of view from people that is just a doctrine and some wrong facts in the society mind. LGBT people are also human and has the right to live. The UN Human Rights Council issued the first resolutions on the recognition of LGBT's rights, which was followed by a report from the United Nations Human Rights Commission documenting violations of the rights of LGBT people, including hate crimes, criminalizations of homosexualities, and discrimination. Following up on the report, the United Nations Human Rights Commissions urged all countries to enact the laws that protect LGBT's rights. The basic rules used by the United Nations are in the perspective of the Universal Declarations of Human Rights. In the United Nations Human Rights Council adopts a resolution of equality of rights which states that every human being is born free and equal, and everyone has the right to obtain rights and his freedom without any discrimination. And yes, because of that, sexual rights is very important for the LGBT people, because they are not a heterosexual like most of the majority in this world. They also have the same rights and opportunities and should not be treated discriminatively or being criminalizing their sexual orientation. So LGBT really need sexual rights in order to be who they are and not scared to show who they really are and contribute to the society. Since they were humans, they doesn't deserve to be treated discriminatively because they're just their different sexual orientation. Because if this LGBT people got their sexual rights, they could help us reduce the number of homeless children by adopting them all over the world. So based on the data from the lifelong adoptions statistic about LGBT adoption statistic in 2020, they say of the 594,000 same-sex couple households in the United States, 115,000 among them have children. Over the years, the number of children living with LGBT parents has risen tremendously. As the trend continues, the number will only increase as same-sex adoptions and parenting become more and more widely accepted. Don't worry, because LGBT couple is a great parents too. According to Stephanie Papa's article about 5 scientific reasons gay parents are awesome, is first, they choose to have kids. Not like the straight couples that are used frequently have oops babies. According to the God Nature Institute, about half of the United States pregnancy are unplanned. And about half of those unplanned pregnancy end in birth rather than abortion. So according to God Matches, parents of unplanned babies can do a great job, of course, but some are in dire circumstances. On the other hand, gay couples, in contrast, generally have to plan to have babies, overcome biological limits to adopt, find surrogates or sperm donors or use in vitro fertilization methods. After persevering through those challenges, gay parents tend to be more motivated, more committed than heterosexual parents on average because they choose to be parents. Second, they nurture the neediest. The number of children in the adoption house is majority filled by the minority that is hard to be adopted. And by the research from the Donaldson Adoption Institute found that 60% of gay and lesbian adoptive parents adopt across races, which is important because minority kids have a thought time getting out of the foster system, and 25% of kids placed with adoptive gay and lesbian parents were older than 3, also a thought age range to adopt. Third, they foster tolerance because of this LGBT cases is ongoing and there are a lot of discrimination things going on. In a 2007 study published in the American Journal of Orthopsychiatry, Clark University Goldberg interviewed 46 adults who grew up with at least one gay parent. And they say men and women felt like they were free to pursue a wide range of interests. Nobody was telling them, oh, you can do that, that's a boy thing, or that's a girl thing. They independently mentioned that they felt their upbringing made them more tolerant and accepting. Fourth, their kids define school, so it's not a matter whether it is a straight parent or same-sex couples that raise the kids, because from the research it is same. The GPA from the kids that educated by the LGBT couples and the straight couple. And the fifth reason is they raise a confident children. An upbringing in same-sex household can give kids a boost of confidence. In a study in 2010 published in the journal Pediatrics, researchers examined the kids of planned lesbian families in which a single lesbian mother or 2 lesbian partners decided to have kids, in contrast to bringing them to the relationships for previous heterosexual partnership. But the kids lesbians were more confident than the kids of straight parents. According to the researchers, active involvement by parents may explain the self-esteem boost. One of the live example of the kids that has been raised by LGBT parents is Josephine Scriver. So Josephine Scriver is actually a model of Victoria's Secret, as you know, and she has a lesbian mother and a gay father. So look at her right now. She's growing up, becoming a model, and she has such a confidence in herself. In an interview in 2015, she said that I feel blessed that I was brought into a family that was thought to be so open. For me, the fundamental part of every childhood should be love, and my parents had so much to give. That is the example of whether or not the parents are straight or not. It is, as long as it's love their children, it doesn't really matter. For the children grow development itself, because Scriver had a unique childhood in her hometown of Copenhagen, that she was conceived via IVF and raised by a lesbian mother and gay father.
So then, what the first thing that we should to do? We have to know that LGBT really need the sexual rights, because if they have the sexual rights, it will be make them more productive than if they don't have the sexual rights itself. Because if they don't have the sexual rights, it will be make them bullied by the society, and it makes them become not productive anymore. And it already happened based on the data that we already provide before. And you have to think that LGBT is not bad as you think. So what we have to do now? The most important thing that we have to do now is tolerance, because the people who fight for LGBT rights needs to respect the culture or opinion of people who oppose it. On the other hand, people who oppose the existence of LGBT people also needs to remain silent and do not discriminate them, so that with tolerance we can live peacefully and happily ever.
So for the conclusion, even though sexual rights only applied in several jurisdictions, but we found that sexual rights is important because we believe that every people could get its sexual rights. They will be more productive than before. It will also improve their psychological health and physical well-being as well. So the evidence of this is the abortion case that already explained by Shafira before. She explained that women who get access to safe abortion, who is healthier mentally and physically than those who cannot get health abortion and safe and health abortion. I mean, and it is also another evidence is the LGBT case that already explained by Dara, that those people who couldn't get sexual rights, the LGBT people who couldn't get its sexual rights, tend to be more suicidal and depression and anxiety. So that's all our presentation. I hope that this video is useful for you, and I hope that you could understand this video well. And thank you for your time. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.